Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, afternoon, whatever part of the country you may be in. My name is Reem Fadierji and I am with Community Boost. We are excited that all of you have chosen to share this hour of your morning with us, and we will be sharing with you the 5 principles to manage through a recession. So let's get started. So I would like to introduce you to your host for today. We are sharing this webinar with Cindy Fallon, the founder and CEO of Create Possibility, as well as Cameron Ripley, the CEO of Community Boost. And I wanted to let you all know that you can join us in the chat room sharing any of your questions or comments. I will be in there trying to navigate any immediate and pressing questions, as well as there will be a significant amount of time at the end to have questions and answers at the end as well. And feel free to connect with us on social, and there are the Twitter handles for anyone that is interested. So to quickly introduce Cindy, Cindy is a former executive director for 18 years. So she's been in your shoes before. She is also a published author and teacher at the nonprofit program at the University of San Diego. And her specialty is specifically within helping nonprofit leaders move from intention to execution, and specifically helping board members get them into motion. So she has 26% average increase in charitable giving, as well as 3 times board engagement. So specialties are specifically within speaking and consulting and retreat. I'm going to hand it over to Cameron as well to dive deeper into what Community Boost is all about, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Reem. And once again, welcome everyone. My name is Cameron Ripley. I'm the CEO here at Community Boost. And we're basically a digital marketing agency that specifically helps nonprofits. We're best known for Google Ad Grant Management, but do a lot of Facebook and Instagram ads, email marketing, recurring giving, you name it. We do it on the online front. Last year, we worked with 186 nonprofits, generated over $7.5 million in online revenue for our nonprofit partners. And, on a local level here in San Diego, we work with the San Diego Foundation and International Community Foundation. And we also work with nonprofits from around the country, including the Liberty Ellis Island Foundation, multiple humane societies, the Trevor Project, and more. And so, what are the top takeaways that we're looking for, to deliver to you all today? First is really understanding what the economic downturn means for your nonprofit based on, historical data and trends. So we've sourced a lot of what happened in the Great Recession, and we're going to be covering that today, as well as learning, nonprofit success stories that are kind of proven case studies of how to strategically plan during challenging times. Next, what digital marketing best practices should we be executing on with potentially tighter budgets? How do we approach development and fundraising during a downturn and even a pandemic? And then how to apply the 5 principles to manage your nonprofit through recession that Cindy and I have put together. And then last, next steps to, and, every attendee on this webinar, if you are up for a one-to-one complimentary session to, look at the specifics of your cause, we are more than happy to do that either individually or collaboratively as a team. So let's dive in. Let's dive into some of the data analysis. And
let's go. Let's do this.
And before we do that, on a personal level, studying what happens in a recession has been something I've been doing a lot of in the past year or more, to be honest. Knowing what will that mean for our nonprofit partners, what does that mean for Community Boost as our own agency. And out of all the things I've studied, there's one kind of analogy that has resonated with me the most, and it's this idea of it's time to buckle up. Like, we're in this race car, and right now it feels like we're going into this very tight turn. we're all pumping the brakes, but we're pumping those brakes in a way where if we time that right, we can carry that momentum, and as we come out of that turn, really step on the gas and become the choice of whatever it is our nonprofit does, not just another choice. And that's kind of this challenge that many organizations are in, where things are shaky, we're moving super fast, we're pumping the brakes to weather the storm, but we're also going to be talking about what does seizing that opportunity look like and hitting that gas at the right time. Because it is time to buckle up, but yet if we do that well, there's an opportunity to zoom ahead, not to make a Zoom joke. But so let's dive into the data. What did the Great Recession of '08 mean for nonprofits? Overall, uncertainty decreases individual giving. Individual giving dropped by 7% in '08 and 6.2% in '09. And then we had slight, slower increases in 2010 and 2011. And I do want to say there's a lot of text on some of these slides, but it was by design because we wanted this to be a guide, almost like a book that your team could reread and look at on a management level. As well as, in addition to individual giving dropped, right? And a lot of that happened because small and mid-sized donors often paused donating during and even after recession. And then when we look at foundations, funding did drop by approximately 30%. Many of these foundations will see their assets depleted by 20, 30, 40% in a very short amount of time, right? We can only imagine what has happened in the past month or so. And so that first reaction, unfortunately, can be to cut back on grant making accordingly and let some of that even rebound. And overall, just donor behavior shift. So attitude shift as there's more volatility and uncertainty, right? Some donors, and I'm sure most people on this webinar are very familiar with this, but feel it might be better to save rather than give in the short term, or they might see giving more as a luxury, and that can impact the donations we're getting. And so there's tons of great content out there, but if I had to boil it down, those are some of the biggest takeaways. And so what did that mean? That's kind of the revenue impact. What else? What was some of the sector impact? And there was basically a poll of nonprofit leadership and what issues did they feel was the most increased importance during this time. And 50% was on brand visibility, 48% on strategic alignment within their organization, 46% on corporate sustainability goals. But interestingly, during the Great Recession, total nonprofits actually continued to grow. More were, being created, and nonprofit employee count actually increased throughout this time as well. And as many of you know, there's a great demand for many services. And so, and I do feel that as Cindy and I were really discussing this, that tangible and transparent ask and kind of this importance of impact measurement really, in our opinion, emerged even stronger during the Great Recession. And it just became, donors really, this is like, really started to man this from the organizations they were giving to. This became, such strong vernacular within every nonprofit conference and nonprofit marketing. We couldn't just, for lack of a better term, phone it in anymore. We had to be really clear into where all the money was going.
Yeah, I would just say that nonprofits that really embraced that took a close look at their case for support and tweaked it and changed it up to be super realistic and honest, those were the ones that had the most success. That was a key factor in moving forward and being able to retain donors.
Yeah, we're seeing that even now as well with some of our partners, which we'll talk about. And then, last, what did COVID-19, what does this economy mean? This is obviously a unique circumstance. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty happening. We're seeing decreases in economic activity. The coming months could be challenging, especially with, like a lot of our museum partners are shut down, symphonies, There's a lot of challenges, to say the least, right? But continued donor uncertainty is definitely anticipated. And even higher income households might be waiting to see what the market does. But there are people giving in different ways, right? So whether that's food donations, peer fundraising for a cause, donating to community funds. For example, like the San Diego Foundation's Community Response Fund has gained a ton of traction, people want to give locally. And then government support, right? So we're going to talk more about this in the principal section, but this is impacting the economy and will be impacting charity, and there's options here to support us on the financial front, which we'll talk about. Recovery speed. A lot of experts that, as we've done a lot of research, are anticipating that what we're experiencing now will unlikely last as long as the Great Recession, and that investments in local business will accelerate quickly, like say in 30 to 60 days, potentially. And there's definitely this large transition to digital, which is something we're definitely going to be discussing more, but people's attention has already been online and on mobile, and now it's even stronger, where you see just massive jumps in the numbers of hours being spent, on social media, on phones, on YouTube. And it's interesting as people compete for that attention, whether that's a virtual fundraiser, or a virtual gala or whatever we're doing. But I'm going to pass it to Cindy and have her discuss really her experience during the Great Recession.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for jumping on this morning. I was an executive director at a YMCA here in San Diego when the Great Recession hit. And let me tell you, it was freaking exhausting. It was scary when it first happened. But thank goodness I was blessed with a board chair who was a terrific leader. And I remember he just called me up and he said, it's you and me, kid. It's up to us. We've got to set the tone with confidence so we can move through this, and we will move through it. And even though we didn't know at the time what the heck we were going to do, we acknowledge that this is an emotional time, and that's important. I'm sure a few weeks ago, most of you were like, what the heck? We've got to shut down our business in many cases, but then really focusing and then face and embrace, as we call it, plan and move forward. So that's what we did. And we realized we needed to communicate often. I don't think you can over communicate, quite frankly, in a situation like this, both to your internal folks, your staff, board members, donors, and that's what we did. We really focused on, okay, we need to pivot, but that means changing strategy, not forgetting about the mission and what our important role in the community was, right? So we assessed what services we could continue, taking a look at both the financial impact of what was going on as well as the mission impact. There were things that probably didn't make a lot of sense financially to keep doing, but we knew that our community, for instance, for our seniors, they came to the Y for social interaction, right? And the difference then was that you still could congregate, right? And so bringing them together, even if they couldn't afford it, we didn't turn anybody away the ability to pay. That was part of our mission already, and we carried that all the way through. That in itself bought us a lot of goodwill, and we were seen as trusted partners in the community as everybody was scrambling to figure out what this meant for their families. And the board, it was, as I mentioned, my board chair was really interesting, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but we all have boards that have people that aren't engaged, right? I don't think I've ever met a board that doesn't say, gosh, there's like a quarter of my board, it doesn't feel like they're doing anything. We were really clear in our communication with the board in terms of what we needed them to do. And it was everything from being advocates in the community and fundraising to maintaining their own memberships at the time, because we had all this earned revenue that people immediately started slashing and cutting because they were looking at what don't I have to have, what's discretionary in my budget, right? So we had to lay out to the board what our strategy and our plan was and what their role was, and they really leaned in. We didn't have to do any layoffs. but we did reductions in hours and we got creative. For instance, there weren't as many people coming in. So if you just thought people not using the pools or not using the fitness centers or not showing up for gymnastics programs or other leadership programs that were in place, those staff people we repurposed and put in other places, because all of the admin and the phones at the front desk and people needing people to talk to through this, we shifted them to other roles. We talked to our largest donors, our most faithful donors, and said, hey, can you give a little bit more? Some could and some couldn't, right? But we showed compassion to them and we laid out our case very clearly. The association as a whole also asked some of our largest donors to do bridge loans for us to get us through that crunch time. We negotiated with our vendors. It's a great time to negotiate with vendors, because at the time it was like, look, we need you to help us on your pricing. And if you can't do it, we can go to somebody else. And that was highly effective. I think I only had one vendor that wasn't really interested in participating. And as we already talked about, case for support really mattered, because this happened in September, if you remember, right before our annual campaign. But our board and I laid out a plan to move our campaign forward and do it anyway, with really clear, tangible outcomes for how that money was going to be used, so we could still continue serving the community. And as you can see in the results there, not only did everybody engage, not only did we get creative with solutions, I kind of call it forced innovation, right? When you're up against the wall, all of a sudden, new ideas are coming forth, which was great. And we involved everybody in that. The team was inspired and motivated, even though it was a tough time and there were unknowns and we didn't know when it was going to end. We knew that our role was to keep them close and informed so they could stay inspired. And guess what? We, as the vast majority of nonprofits in that period of time, could not raise as much money. We raised just a little bit more than we had the year before. And you know, this, we don't have time to go deep dive into all the mechanics of that. If you want to know what we did, happy to talk to you later, but we kept building on our strengths. And that was really important. We knew that our strengths were, previously to the recession, our reputation. We had some reserves in the bank and our leadership was strong. So it was, how can we leverage those? And we continued to build on our story, build on our reputation, and our fundraising was very successful. So it can be done. Hang in there and be really clear about what your strengths are. What we know now, and as we jump into these principles here, 2 key phases of recession management. It's really about weathering the storm immediately, right? Make sure your team is okay and that the organization stays in business. And then, and once you're feeling pretty good, that's as solid as it can be at the time, then really leverage those opportunities. Don't sit back and wait and get complacent. You've got to move. So let's jump into what our 5 principles are to manage your nonprofit through the recession. You can see here that we're going to talk about really focused, courageous leadership. We're going to talk about the finance piece. I just saw that poll where that's a critical point of concern for you. How to invest more into marketing. And every day we're fundraising. We'll talk about why that matters so much and how to move forward and faster and seize the opportunity. We're going to, and just to set your expectations too, we're going to touch on each of these. We don't have time today to do a deep dive, and we decided we wanted to allow for your questions too. So we'll talk to you a little later about how, if you want to take a deeper dive into some of these, how you can access this. So principle 1, practice focused, courageous leadership. And you know, I hate the term that this is a war, but it is a war on this virus. And it's time for us to focus on what's going to matter most during this period of time. Radical transparency and compassionate candor. Remember, your staff, your volunteers, your donors, everybody is dealing with the same thing, right? So right up front, I know when people were talking about, how do we communicate now? What do we do right now? We don't want to talk to our donors. We don't want to do this. Again, you can't communicate too much. And you have to be careful about how you are communicating. Be consistent. I know that a lot of our nonprofits that we're close to immediately did daily video conferencing with staff teams, dropped that off now to maybe once or twice a week. They did that with their boards as well. The point is exude optimism, focus on your strengths. This is temporary. And even though we don't know how long it's going to last, even when we don't know exactly what the outcomes are, we are all going to persevere so we can help each other get through it. Then focusing on the team, this is critical. You've got to be decisive, but not reactionary, right? You want to make decisions based on data. You want to set clear benchmarks with deadlines. And when it comes to your people, they're your greatest asset. So be thoughtful about who can provide the most value now and going forward, right? Rather than thinking about who can be cut, consider which people are central to the long-term of the organization. And I know that many of you may have already furloughed some folks. We're going to talk about, okay, what's next? Because this is a phased, you need to have scenarios for different times during this situation. And we want to talk quickly about the CEO and the board chair. They're part of your leadership too, right? They need to practice focused, courageous leadership. So as far as the CEO goes, it's your job to analyze the impact. And I know you've all done this already. Continue to do it because it could be a moving target. We just found out isolation is going to be in place longer. So what does that mean? And what if it lasts even longer? Determine what the risks are, then develop a plan, set your priorities, and share that with your board. They are experts in the field in some cases. Make sure that they have buy-in and communicate with your board chair regularly because this situation is so fluid, and make sure you're clear about the why behind your decisions. Then for the board chair, let them know what you need from them. And for those board members who are on this call, listen closely to this because what your CEOs and EDs don't need, trust me, I know this, they don't need you to be second guessing everything that comes out, every thought that comes out of their mouth, right? That your CEO, your ED is closest to the operations. They have boots on. So listen carefully to understand and ask what they need. Then board chair, you're the one that should be communicating with the board. Direct their curiosity. Your CEO and ED, they have way more, so many more other things they're dealing with right now. So keep the board calm, keep them focused on assist in managing communication with external stakeholders and make sure that they know what their job is in fundraising too. Stay focused on oversight and help the ED with contingency plans. So in the short term, checklist for boards, what you can do now is do virtual check-ins regularly, focus on oversight, use policies and data to help your ED make decisions, and engage the community now. We'll talk about how to do that in a second. Longer term, once it's over, then you can look at things like the return to normal plan to stabilize, because it's not going to be doors open, business as usual. There's going to be a transition period. Review your policies. Was there a crisis plan? Did your strategies work? Did you have enough reserves? And assess how your board did. Did you lean in? You can assess your board also once this is over. It's not the time to do it now. Focus on short term. And let's keep rolling here. Principle number 2, obsess over finances. I'm sure you're obsessed with finances right now, but let's figure out what you can do in terms of an action plan and in a way to stay positive. Be hyper realist. We know that cash is king right now. The more liquid that you are, the better. Some of you are in better positions than others. Update your forecasts regularly. Get the data that you need so that you can measure and do some planning. Be really clear. Do you have enough reserves for the next 2 months or not? Key questions. Create a contingency plan. Again, this is changing rapidly, this scenario. Some of you have been able to continue offering your services, but in a different way or in a limited capacity. How is that going to affect short-term and long-term finances? Protecting the core. This is critical. Some of you are probably doing this intuitively right now, but let's get specific. What is mission critical? How can you adjust spending? Both your board and staff need to agree on the answers to a couple of key questions. Excuse me, what is the work and who are our beneficiaries that define the essence of our organization? This is all about mission. what must we try to continue to do? What do they cost? What's their impact? So you're looking at the double bottom line. And I have a tool that's called a matrix map that helps you look at the financial needs and impact, as well as the actual impact on your constituents and your beneficiaries. And it will help you make more objective decisions during this period. So if you want that, my email will be available to you. Let me know and I can shoot that over to you. In terms of actual action plans, what action you can take right now, all of you, I'm sure, have heard about the Families First legislation that came out on the 18th and the CARES Act that was just passed this past Friday. And Cameron, feel free to jump in here at any point too. This is not a deep dive in that bill. However, just a quick note on what's in there. If you're a nonprofit with 500 or fewer employees, there's some great stuff in there. They have a paycheck protection piece in there that helps fund your payroll. It's potentially forgivable. There's some things you need to know about it. There's also things in there about rent and about utilities. By the way, that includes benefits on the payroll piece of that. There's a tax credit also you can get if your operations have been suspended, but you can't double dip. So we need to you want to make sure that you have access to experts who can help you make key decisions as you are reading through this. And we know people that can help you do that. So if you don't have an accountant or if you don't have an HR specialist, let us know. Also look at your employers associations in town. We have a San Diego Employers Association here who's pumping out resources, doing webinars about all of this, and they can help you on it. We've got a link there to the National Council of Nonprofits. They're the national organization that's in DC. They have their finger on the pulse. Great resources too. And there was just, the Nonprofit Times just this morning put out 7 ways this CARES Act can financially support your nonprofit. There's also small business association loans with capped interest. As you may know, they've lifted the limits on charitable giving deductions. So there's a lot that you can tap into. Do not ignore this. If you're under 500 employees particularly, if you're bigger than that, there's also some options there for you. Some grants, $5,000 per employee. Again, there's caveats to it, there's conditions. You've got to have your ducks in a row, but most of you will be able to benefit from one or both of these legislations, the legislation that went through. And the Family First was all about extending and increasing unemployment benefits too. And Cam, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Hopefully my headphones got disconnected, so hopefully the audio is good here. But there's definitely, okay, perfect. It's definitely a pretty, developing situation. But as far as for most people on this call, I do believe that this payroll protection is likely one of the things that can be most impactful in the short term. And I believe to start getting prepared, it's really to just have your financials ready to go. And it is basically, I believe, 2.5 times your monthly payroll is what the loan amount can be, backed by the government in essence. And Sydney mentioned, basically potentially forgivable if that goes to protecting staff and rent and things like that. So just definitely, I think overall what really coaching on is you want to be able to get, in an ideal world, get through all of this without these things, and know that worst case scenario, but also know what options there are. And if you have board or team or vendors that are effective in supporting here, definitely get them in motion too, so you have all your options and know how these things can benefit your kind of getting through that phase 1 of weathering the storm to then step into further growth.
Yeah, thanks for that, Cameron. Access your experts. bottom line. Access your experts who are going to be able to help you make good decisions around that. We wanted to also point out that check your insurance policy, because there may be an opportunity for some business interruption insurance. Typically, this is a little bit tricky. Usually applies if there's natural disasters and things of that sort and your building burned down. But check it out. Since this was government mandated, there might be some opportunities for you there. And we have an expert that we know on that can help you pull your information and determine whether or not, what questions to ask to make sure you're eligible, and then how to get your information prepared so that you can present it to the insurance company if you are. So that's something you might not have thought about. If you have a line of credit and you haven't accessed it yet, do it now and draw it all down to the max that you can. Even if you don't feel like you need it this second, you might need it in 60 days. And if you wait, the bank may turn you down. So access your line of credit. Obviously, those reserves you have set up that were for a rainy day, guess what? It is the rainy day. Let's get through this short-term situation by using our reserves as well as the help from the government if it's going to set you up for success going forward, and you need to do that. I already talked about when we were going through this before, how we negotiated with vendors. You can negotiate with your landlords. You might have a force majeure clause in your lease, by the way, which might be helpful when there's unforeseeable things that happen that keep you from fulfilling your lease contract. Check that out. If you have debt, talk to your bank. See what they're willing to do with you. Will they look at different schedule on your payment plans? Will they reduce interest? Have these conversations. Do everything that you can to stay as liquid as possible so that you can get through this. And stay in touch with your local community foundations. I'm sure many of you have seen that they're setting up emergency funding opportunities, and donors are jumping on that where they can to help support the nonprofit sector. Again, know what your strengths are, build on those, and communicate your needs, and revisit your scenarios. Again, what you decided to do 3 weeks ago is probably changing right now. So ensure that you're looking at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days out, as well as a longer term plan. Those are some tips for how to obsess over your finances so it puts you in a little better position and than you are right now. So I'm gonna flip this back to Cameron to talk about marketing.
Thank you. And also Rick posted here in the chat that most major banks are setting up the process to apply for the payroll protection. And that's also what I'm hearing too. So hopefully who you bank with typically will be able to be a tremendous resource for you. But let's dive into, principle 3 here, which is to invest more into marketing. And and I'm not saying this because I, founded a marketing agency, but this is really what, a lot of the experts we've discussed with, a lot of the organizations that have been around for decades, now really is not the time to cut back on marketing or fundraising and growth. We have to continue to fill our pipeline of potential donors or whatever your revenue streams are. And I just want to say that really brand is the ultimate competitive advantage for an organization. And I know it can be difficult being quarantined, and but now really is the time to try and push more content than ever. But of course, we have to be very sensitive, really monitor our tonality, and be compassionate. But I do believe that the majority of people out there are on social a ton and overall are wanting hope and something that feels good and gives back to their community, and especially with your current donors, but even potential donors. We've seen some really cool campaigns come out of even over the past month. And overall, just this building of your brand and posting more content. One of the key things that we like to coach on is it's not about the perfect piece of content. It's about documenting the journey and even going through some potentially the struggles you might be or the challenges you're facing now,
those are things worth documenting and being transparent about, and can be a heroic story to serving your mission. And just to reiterate, like, people are glued to technology right now more than ever. I've been following a ton of the data of just like where people's time online is going. And we always just like to say, market where people's attention is at. And more than ever, it is online, it's on mobile, it's in their inbox, and there's just an opportunity to meet them there. And when really thinking through the marketing mix and the potential channels we can be utilizing for our 130 plus nonprofit partners, these are definitely some of the top digital channels we're recommending you build your strategy around on and put a lot of time and resources into to move the needle during the challenging time. So first, foremost, email marketing is just tried and true. It's cost effective. This is often the one our nonprofit partners or potential partners are most familiar with. And I definitely, think you should continue to communicate here, not go quiet, not just put out a general COVID email, but really, continue to talk about your mission and what you're doing. And if things are changing, right, we'll get into an example here of a museum that we've partnered with. But email definitely works. From there, social media marketing. I mean, this is people's attention is glued to Instagram. It's glued to Facebook, and really identify those channels. Even LinkedIn, like if you're trying to hit a B2B relationship, so much just organic possibility there, and you just got to really focus on content creation. And I think one of the things that nonprofits can sometimes struggle with is this volume over perfection. And we can get gun shy. And if taking anything away from this on the marketing front, it's to post more. Like, marketing in today's world is just, writing comms, pictures, video, and then amplifying that. And people don't even remember what they looked at yesterday, right? We're just scrolling, we're in our feeds, we're in our inboxes. So just try more, get stuff out more. And I think when we get overwhelmed with content creation, a lot of the nonprofits we work with, they forget about this one key simple principle, and it's we can repurpose content. Not every original piece on social media has to just be fully original. We can repurpose stuff. So like in our own example at Community Boost, we'll shoot videos, we'll talk about marketing, and then we might change it up, or we'll add a banner image to the top, or we'll cut it up a little bit. And just remember that, and just be as active as possible, and lean towards, when in doubt, get it out. Next is Facebook and Instagram advertising. So this is a little bit different than organic social media. This is using Facebook's ad platform, and this channel has probably been the one I've been most bullish on in the past couple of years, and it has tremendous hyper-targeting capabilities, and paired with very compelling creative opportunities, whether it's a video ad, image carousel ads, just long form. When I say Facebook and Instagram ads, again, we run all the ads for the Facebook platform, but if we run ads just on Instagram, that's how we do it. They're the same company. And we're often seeing, 2x, 3x, 5x, 10 times, 10x return on ad spend for our nonprofit partners. And this channel just is tremendous. And if you have really limited budget, using it for what we call like remarketing, so people that have hit your site, but that we want to make sure, see our fundraising campaigns or our, event ticket sales, is a really powerful way to do it. We've done whole webinars on the channel alone, but definitely you can get started and even get a lot out of even a small budget. You know, $100, $200, like that can all go a really long way for a specific campaign. And obviously, if it's profitable, you can really scale. It has a ton of scale potential. And then last is the Google Ad Grant, which for those that are new to the Ad Grant is an opportunity to utilize $10,000 in free Google ads every month. They're kind of in-kind search ads, so Google's not giving you $10,000, but they allow you to, when you're Googling things, to be at the first page of Google. And you can really send hundreds, if not thousands, of visitors a month. And if you're pretty familiar with the Google Ad Grant, there are actually things Google's going to be doing for specific types of organizations. So if you're doing anything, you know, very specific to help the community for, you know, COVID-19, you can actually potentially get more ad grant budget than normal. So for example, like the San Diego Foundation, we're supporting their ad grant in a San Diego Community Response Fund, and we're, you know, applying to hopefully get more ad spend during that window. So again, those top channels during the recession are really to focus energy on email marketing, social media marketing, Facebook and Instagram ads, and Google Ad Grant. So those are the channels to really amplify whatever campaign you have. And I just did want to share one example, and I think this kind of illustrates a lot of the concepts I'm discussing, and that's one of our long-term partners. It's called the Tenement Museum. It's a really amazing museum in New York where the tenements are, you know, where many immigrants lived when migrating to the United States. They have this amazing tour where it's very personalized and humanizing, but they've been closed, and, you know, they've had to do some layoffs. And I mean, we're talking about like monitoring, cutting magazine subscriptions. That's how concerning, you know, everything is for this organization. And this was in the you know, COVID or the coronavirus was taking off. Everyone was communicating about it, and they were kind of on the fence, but really had no choice, and launched the Help the Tenement Museum Survive. So just super real about why they needed gifts. And they hit up their email list, and this data is getting updated every day still because they're still campaigning, but over $70,000 has come in from emails. You can see an example here, just clean, to the point, and, you know, just framing it. These are extraordinary times. We're in an extraordinary place, and we're facing an extraordinary crisis, and just being so candid and transparent of why they needed funds. On their website, you can see they kind of took over their banner page and really just is like, we need these funds right now. And that's where they were at. And then a Facebook fundraiser. So this isn't, we've only done a little bit of Facebook ads, but they took to Facebook fundraising on kind of the peer-to-peer fundraising side. And that's brought in 17,000, you know, hundreds of shares, 109 shares, hundreds of likes, and just really neat. And that's a great way to not just fundraise, but to also get the word out. Some of those people might go to the site, things like that. They've gotten some local PR. And I just thought this was a really real example of, you know, despite everything going on, hitting these channels in a compassionate way, and just being very real with where they were at. And fortunately, you know, they are a great cause, and people have been able to rally around this, but also exemplifies people want hope, and they want to help things that they like or that are important to their community or to their friends. So I'll move on to principle 4 here, which is related to marketing, which is really every day we're fundraising. And I forgot who said it, but I saw it on LinkedIn, I believe, and they wrote, fundraising is a revenue center, not a cost center. And
yes, repeat after me, right?
And this is just really important to reiterate, to, you know, do everything you can to maintain your development staff, to mobilize them, and but yet it's hard. It's hard to potentially fundraise for your cause during these times. And that's where we have to, again, kind of focus on compassionate messaging. And all our appeals need to really clearly hit the 3 T's, which the 3 T's in an appeal are, it needs to be transparent. You know, where do these dollars go? What are they helping us do, right? So for Tenement Museum, literally helping us stay open. They're tangible. You know, how much money do you need? This amount of dollars creates this amount of impact, and then take action. So just really simplifying what exactly do you want them to do, to give here, to start a fundraiser, etc. And again, we need to remember that a lot of people are struggling and it could get worse. But what we learned from the Great Recession and what's even working with our nonprofit partners now is, you know, just meeting people where they're at and just being really clear with those 3 T's. But that also
I would just say too, Cameron, that initially I know that many of us were like, oh my gosh, we can't, how could we possibly ask for money? Everybody's struggling too. And yeah, maybe that's not the first communication you want to have. If you want to see a good, some good video messaging, servingseniors.org, their CEO, Paul Downey, did a series of videos that he then pumped out through social media and email, as Cameron was just alluding to earlier. But what you said about documenting the journey, Cameron, I think was a brilliant way to say that, because his first video was just all about, hey, we're still serving meals to seniors. This is how we're doing it. They can't come in and congregate in a big cafeteria. However, we're packing them up, we're delivering, they can pick up, so on and so forth. Subsequent videos then continued to update on the story and then told their donors, their supporters, their partners, how they could play a part in that mission work as well, whether it was in kind, whether it was donations or whatnot. But it was very well done and sensitive to the fact that we're all in this and being affected by different ways. So I think what you were just saying is really true. And that's an example of one way to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. And I mean, it kind of leads us into this notion of double down on audience segmentation and custom ask outreach. So really understand your list. We have to really segment, sub-segment, make sure we're getting the right ask in front of the right donor. And that'll help you feel even more confident to mobilize and send more. And even to Cindy's point during the YMCA story, right? Like really level with your most steadfast donors as well, and how they can maybe even reallocate their funds to what they typically give to, and even share those stories, right? And then next is triple down on stewardship and shine at saying thank you. So we talk a lot, we're going to talk here about seizing opportunity, but this is an opportunity to say thank you and express your gratitude like no other organization.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult, but we know we're probably going to need more funds in 60 days, 120 days, and throughout this year, right? So if we can, don't forget about just how important great stewardship is. It doesn't have to be hyper expensive, but what I love seeing is when organizations get really creative. That could be, if you're able to, beneficiary saying thank you, or, I talk a lot about this example, but it was one of my friends, she worked at the development at an organization called Blink Now, and on Giving Tuesday would just send thank you videos, right? So would get the YouTube app on her phone, shoot a thank you video, upload it to their YouTube in an unlisted link, and just email that out. And, large donors would be like, no one does this for us. This is amazing, right? And that's just an opportunity. It's more important than ever during challenging times for our students.
Well, and I would say plan it. I mean, now is the time to lay out the next 6 months of what your donor engagement stewardship strategy is going to be. And I want to give you a couple other examples too of what people are doing right now. One nonprofit whose one of their major revenue streams is childcare revenue. It's fee for service for them. It is shut down, right? they, after doing some initial communication, then asked the parents who had already paid tuition if they were able, and they did it in a very compassionate way, to consider converting their tuition, leaving it there, not asking for a refund, but converting it to donations. And I think it was, last I heard, it was about 27% of the parents did that. Some hadn't replied yet, so that number could still even go up. But they did it, you know, in a way that, like I said, that was really compassionate. But that was just one way to maintain some of that revenue, but now it's charitable. And I wanted to just point out too, because documenting your journey, I think, again, is just so important. Back in the early 2000s, when we had a lot of wildfires in California, I was still at the Y, and in our service area, thousands of houses were destroyed, and many, many people were affected. And we had to close the Y because the air quality was so poor, and we weren't able to do anything for a number of weeks. I think it was 2 weeks, if I recall. But one of the things we knew we could do, because we had this facility sitting there, is help those people on the front line. So we opened up our parking lot, we opened up our locker rooms and our showers to first responders. We actually had National Guard in the parking lot, setting up one of their bases there with CAL FIRE. Then we had firefighters and police officers who weren't going home or were working 24/7, come into the Y and take showers, and we fed them and just relax for a bit. That's a story. Story to get out. And we got it out initially because we wanted to make sure everybody knew, and that any first responder, if there was somebody we were missing that didn't fit into the categories that we initially thought of neatly, that they knew that they could come also, that we were an essential service. Currently, people that have childcare capabilities can provide childcare for essential workers and receive some funding for that. Parents may still be willing to pay for that in some regards too. So this kind of creative thinking is going to perhaps loosen up a little bit of revenue that's not typical, right? And it may affect how you think going forward too, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we also, by the way, during the fires, had our galas scheduled. Well, this was back in 2003. And, you know, virtual auctions and things like that were barely even a thing at the time. But we decided we had to cancel the event in terms of hotel and all of that actually being on site. But we did do a virtual auction. Here's the thing. Our sponsors all stayed put. None of them dropped out. And that's because we were real with them. And we told them the compassionate story about that we had staff people and we had members who had lost their homes, and we needed to raise money to help them during that crisis. In addition to what else we were doing with first responders and so forth, we needed, so we told our very candid story, and we did the online auction, and we couldn't postpone it for a number of reasons, just timing didn't work out. But all of that to say, at the end of the day, we still made 82% of our goal, even though we didn't have it, because we also saved expenses. This was one of those unforeseen circumstances, and we were able to get out of our contract with the hotel so we didn't have to pay those expenses. So be creative, don't give up.
I love that. And, you know, for the sake of time, I'm gonna keep moving here, but even mentioning virtual fundraising and virtual galas too. I'm doing a webinar on Classy on Thursday on that specific topic if anyone's interested. But yes, so stewardship, and then launching recurring giving too is just, you know, the data is super clear. This isn't just having a recurring ability on your site, but, you know, some people can only give a smaller amount right now, but building that predictability into your model and figuring out that whole appeal can be huge, and is a great time to think about launching it if you haven't. And then last but not least, principle 5 here is move faster and seize opportunity. And, you know, again, I forgot who said it, but just never waste a crisis, right? Like this is an opportunity as well to really motivate our team to hit a whole new gear, to become the choice, not just another choice for what you do, right? There will naturally be gaps in mission and And this is an opportunity to step into that. So you're going to want to foster adaptation amongst your team. You're going to want them to be taking more risks, and you have to identify what you must leave behind, even if your organization loves it, to move forward. And you have to develop the next practices while executing on today's best practices. And that's just naturally, like, overall, theoretically, what this recession is going to do. Also, talent will be available. There will be an opportunity to find more great talent if you're prepared to make those investments. You can diversify revenue streams, right? So, you know, we talked about that. That's even in partly recession proofing, but definitely explore digital channels. And it's just take more risks during this time, and test more and launch more things. And you just have to move faster, and hopefully, you know, can break any inertia that your organization might typically have. So we want to do a quick recap. I know we're running tight on time, but we'll go ahead and hit this, and happy to stay longer. But if anyone does have a hard stop, we'll be sure to send you the recording as well as the abilities to follow up too. But Sydney, you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, just quick wrap. So know the data, be a hyper realist, and understand the phases. You're going to go through some emotional things. Personally, stay focused and face and embrace what's real. Keep moving forward. The 5 principles, again, leadership, finances, marketing, fundraising. Seize the opportunity. This is not the time to sit back, and focus on short-term as well as long-term. Don't forget to celebrate the wins too with your team. Any little thing you can find that's going well, make a big deal out of it. And as Cameron talked about at the beginning, we're here to help you and your causes so that you can continue to move your mission forward. So I'm available. There's my email. There's my phone number. Just call me. We can jump on the phone, figure out where you are now, and set up some short and long-term strategies with you and or your board members.
Yeah, and we are as well here at Community Boost. If you're looking to do a one-on-one session to either talk digital strategy or audit things, we're doing a lot of campaigns specific to what's going on in the world for our partners, and we would love to connect with you. But without further ado, I'd love, for the time we have, if anyone wants to stay on, to just open it up to Q&A here. So feel free to post any questions in the chat you may have. Peter, yes, we will definitely email you recording and the deck to all registrations. Sarah, you ask, does confirming Google Ad Grants allows no mention of COVID? That is correct. However, Community Boost is actually a certified partner, and we can apply for exemption of those keywords. It's just, you know, Google does have to be safe, right? Or else people might be running ads on all sorts of things, kind of taking advantage of the situation. But if you apply for exemption, you can get that approved. Christy asks, can you give ideas on segmenting email lists? Sure. You know, I think you can break this up between like major gifts, you know, churn donors, supporters that haven't given, maybe first-time gifts. Naturally, gift level is really important in times like this. So kind of think about your buckets of donations, and when you email, you might be asking for a specific amount. Cindy, are you able to see these questions as well?
I am. So let's see. Advice for how to keep a major gifts campaign as part of a capital campaign moving forward. Yeah, tricky, right? And I don't know what your cause is, or you are in the campaign, you know, the capital campaign, and if you're still at lead gifts or further down the line. So we might want to talk offline, Cynthia. Great name, by the way. But it's all going to come down to those relationships, and it's going to come, as you well know, and also because when you're documenting your journey, as Cameron said, that's going to make your case stronger, and has your case even become more relevant, more essential, more critical to the community. So while you may take a minute to pause, to regroup, to re-strategize, we're all saying continue, move forward, even with those big campaigns, and talk to your donors about what's real. And like I said, if you want to talk further, be happy to do that offline. Just get in touch with me. But this is, even with a major campaign, it's not time to stop. It's not time to stop. Here's the thing, right? The donors that are in a position to help you with major gifts may be taking a minute, depending on what the market's doing, as Cameron alluded to before. And they're also getting advice from their advisors that this recovery is going to be half the time as it was in 2008. And so while the dip was fast, the recovery is going to be fast as well. So there's reason to be optimistic, but yeah, there's nuances in your approach you might want to make. But this would be a great time to reassess what your case for support is and see how you can refine that.
We had an earlier question from Teresa asking, are we concerned about people wanting to feel comfortable returning to events? I think that's a really interesting question. I think people naturally might be a bit hesitant, but I also do feel that once people feel safe and things are clean, that there will be almost like a surge in small business or fundraising events. But we're seeing a ton of successful virtual galas, virtual fundraising events. Again, I kind of mentioned that webinar we're doing on Thursday with Classy, and that's the whole topic. So I would encourage you to think about what you can bring on virtual for those type of events. But I do think there will be hesitation at first, but also you're going to then have a lot of eagerness. You know, I know I'm like miss my team, and for example, right? And people are going to miss those things too. And then Melissa had another question here.
And she's from Hawaii. Hey, Melissa, I just want to say hi. Hope you're well. Yes.
The question is, so regardless of the loveliness of Facebook and Instagram posts, just post and remain in positive communication with the community. I'm at a Y and looking for ways to maintain good, supportive contact with our patron staff and really anyone interested. Do you have any?
Well, so I know what some other Ys are doing, and I'm sure you do too, because Kevin and his team has been pumping info out, but streaming online classes, right? For fitness classes. There was one I heard about a Y who was in their team leadership program. So they're doing video conferences with that group. It was a smaller group, I believe between 15 and 20. So they were able to do similar to what some schools are doing with online learning, but just getting them together so they have a sense of community and instilling in them what those leadership practices are for them too during a time of crisis, right? So you want to pump out things that you are, and if you're doing any childcare for essential workers, make sure that people know about that, right? Because that's going to continue to develop that level of trust. They're going to remember the why as a community partner going forward, whether or not they're actually participating in what you are able to do right now. And don't be afraid to ask. You know, you pump out some of those stories, and then what is it, when is it every third one it's appropriate to make an ask of some sort, whether it's financial or in kind or whatever you might need.
Yeah, and I think, I'd have to audit what you guys are doing a little bit, but overall, Instagram stories are really effective right now. Polling your audience if you can, right. Going live as mentioned too, but just continue to be creative. If you have any sort of challenge you can do, or your own take of like a push-up challenge or something like that, just keep trying. But I think if you can, in the idea of a challenge is if you can have people tagging your organization and creating content, then you can reshare a lot of that, and that can be powerful. And yes, the link to link to a next webinar. Oh, sure. We can include a send for the Thursday virtual fundraising webinar. It's on a different platform, but I know I mentioned that. All right. Well, Reem, is there any other questions you might have noticed that we should address? I know you've been monitoring this.
It looks like we've hit most of them.
Okay, perfect. Well, I just want to say, thank you. Thank you for everyone hopping on today. We're going to try and be doing a lot more webinars at Community Boost. That's kind of where we were supposed to be hitting a lot of conferences in the beginning of the year, and then it was always a part of our longer term strategy, but we'll certainly be doing that. But yeah, any parting words?
I just want to say, hang in, stay focused, stay positive. You can do this, and access the resources that are available to you, right? And Cameron and I are here for you. Don't hesitate to get in touch with us today, tomorrow, or at a later time so we can do a deeper dive with you on any of these things.
Beautiful. Well, thanks everyone. We'll be in touch, and this will all be in your inbox soon.